clip of Story is really cool because, and I'm pretty sure it was the beginning of last year. Um, it's a really low pitch, and in fact, I'm not going to say it's not hittable because he hit a home run with it, but it's shin. I would say it's dropping about 5 degrees, and it's below his kneecap. Okay, it's below his kneecap. So how does he get to that pitch? We do a lot of high pitches here, for barrel control because that's a pretty decent trend we got going on where pitchers are throwing up there. But how about this pitch that's down? So if we go back to Story, probably is my favorite move of his is his rhythm and how smooth he glides. So as he glides forward, so once he gets his foot up in the air, so actually let's mark where he starts. Okay, so I'm just going to draw a box around his toes where he starts. And then he lifts it up and he only brings it back about maybe 3 inches, right? He only brings it back 3 inches and he's only about 3 or 4 inches off the ground. That's what's cool. Like he doesn't have a huge leg kick. And then he glides forward, and of course the camera's moving, so we really don't know how far this stride is. Okay, so my apologies there. I didn't look at that yet. So I'll start with, okay, his feet, I'll draw a line that's that far apart. And then when he strides, okay, that line is, maybe 20% bigger, right? So he probably took a total step of 8 inches or so. But that step, as he's gaining ground, look how he's just hovering his front foot over the ground. It's only like I said, 3 or 4 inches off the ground. Now, what's cool about that is he can drop it at any time. So say he's looking for a breaking pitch and they throw him an inside fastball. Because his foot's only a few inches off the ground, he can drop it right here. Boom. I'm going to drop my foot and be quick with my hands to get to that pitch. Or if it's a little slower, I can let my foot go and hold my weight on my back leg and my back hip a little bit longer. Or, I can just drop and go whenever I feel like it. So it's a very adjustable stride versus somebody that gains the same amount of ground, probably has the same weight shift, right? The same amount of energy transfer, but doesn't have the risk of pulling their knee up really high or their foot up really high. So that's one of his unique, I've always liked that because when I work with players, when I'm trying to build rhythm, this is always where I start. I always start with this move where they're just gliding to see what their athleticism tells me. And then from there, we'll figure out, okay, do we want to go further? Do we want to not go as far? Do we want to have a little bit of a leg kick? Whatever kind of fits that player's mold, that's what we're going to work on. But I always start with this one. So that's number one. Number two, something that's interesting with him. Okay, and my players know, and I know all our online academy listeners I make, or all my online academy players I make listen to these breakdowns, okay, and I send them to them. But, one of the things that's interesting to me is he actually flattens his bat as he strides. So most people start with it, like if you think of Bryce Harper starts with the bat like on his shoulder, right? And then as he strides, he lifts it up vertically. If you look at Story, he starts more up vertically when he loads, but then as his foot goes forward, he flattens his bat behind him, okay? So most people in this position are like at a 45-degree angle with the bat, probably be like this, okay? Acuna's like this, straight up, but you can see Story's still a little bit flatter, okay? So I always teach our players in the beginning, those of you that are listening, right? We teach it on the shoulder so that it's flat and we can feel an easy turn. Then we'll start to kind of load the hands up a little bit more as our mechanics, smooth out. But this is probably one of the flattest positions at launch, his bat angle, okay? So vertical would be this way and flat would be, maybe slightly under where he is, okay? But you can see if there was a clock, he's more in that like 230 range, okay, where his bat is, where most people are like in the 1 o'clock range. So interesting move there. Then as he goes to rotate, heel plants. Okay, you can see him cheating for a low pitch. So see how his back elbow is starting to come down a little bit more? They're still moving together. We talk about the elbows and the elbow separation. He doesn't have a lot of elbow separation. Not nearly as much as like a Vlad Guerrero that we reviewed Who else have we recently reviewed? Simeon, like Simeon's got more of a separation there. Turner had, not Turner, oh, sorry. Who's the Dodgers outfielder? Yeah. Taylor. Yeah, so much wider. But regardless of how separated your elbows are here, the key is if there was a brace between them, that separation, if they're 12 inches apart, 16 inches apart, or 8 inches apart, as long as they stay that way during the initial rotation, we're good. And that's what you see here. But you can see him kind of drop his hands to get to that pitch. You can see his back shin really trying to get down. He's kind of rolling in his back foot. You're going to see Chris Bryant in a Rockies uniform kind of do that same move with the legs. And then that gets his barrel, down a little bit more. You can see that barrel's vertical bat angle is a lot steeper on this pitch because it's below his knees. So if I draw that same line to the catcher, I think it was kind of like that. Okay, maybe a little higher than that. You can see how he got to that low pitch. And notice how his power V is pretty low too. So if I stop him at extension, although he didn't get fully extended, but this is his power V position, notice how low it is. Right? It's always going to be lower on low pitches. If it's not, then we topped it. Okay? If you have a high power V, meaning your right arm is extended here and your left arm is extended here and your bat is pointing up like this, but the pitch was, channeling down here like this one, then what happened is you swung up too much through contact and you would roll over that low pitch. So that's always something that I look for with pitches. Are they going to be a good low ball hitter? Maybe. It all depends on when they get behind the ball, do they extend this right arm on an angle like this to get through it? If they don't, and that right arm doesn't straighten until it gets on an angle like this, then that's a player that's going to roll over a ton of pitches. That's a guy I'm going to throw a lot of breaking balls to, 12-6 breaking balls to, because they're going to have a hard time getting through that pitch that's breaking down on them. So anyway, pretty cool move there. Again, on a low pitch, you can see his front leg really push back there at the end and straighten out. One of the things that's great, now if he was late on this pitch, here's, again, this is a really low pitch, but if he's late and hits the ball here, like behind his, well, it's probably equal to his front knee based on the camera angle here. Because his vertical bat angle is so steep early in the zone, he's going to foul that pitch off, okay? So he's a guy that is going to foul pitches up and to the right, okay? If he drops that barrel, now the only way to get to this pitch is to drop your barrel a lot, okay? So this is a great learning moment for all of my players, because if you set up a tee, here's what most kids do because somebody told them to, okay? They say, hey, when you set up the tee, always set it up low. Okay, always set it up at the knees. So what happens is we have to get to this position that he's in. Okay, where you drop the barrel a little bit. Okay, your hands slot lower, and then you get to that pitch and you practice it. So if you take, 200 swings a week on a pitch that low, and you don't take 200 swings a week with a pitch up here, then your hand path now becomes what he's doing. I'm going to drop my hands a little bit more. I'm going to drop my barrel a little bit more. So when you have this kind of move and this kind of bat vertical angle, yes, it's great for you to get to a pitch like this. But if that's the only move you know, which I see a ton of, by the way, they'll have this same vertical bat angle, but they'll have their hands up here, like at the top of their chest or even higher. So they'll have their hands really high, but they'll still have the bat vertical angle of like -40 something. And then they're going to try to hit a pitch up here at the top of the thighs or the waist, and then they just foul it off all the time, or they top spin it to the left side. So the moral of this story is you have to be flexible with your learning, okay? You have to do, it's always easier to drop your hands than it is to get your hands up, okay? So what I do is when we're warming up, I'm always warming up, and honestly, just turn on the MLB Network snippets that they put in and watch the players warm up. Where does Bichette put the tee? Like it is chest. Like if you look at that recent one that was floating around of him, I don't know if it was spring training this year or last year. Like his first few swings are a super high pitch. Donaldson's the same way. So guys that you think are really, big time home run hitters that, are barrel droppers and just try to hit the ball in the air, watch how they actually warm up, because it's totally different than maybe what they're doing in games when they're natural swings. So you have to fight that. Story is a natural low ball hitter, okay? This is a natural move for him. So he's going to get beat up here. So where does he practice? He practices up here. I'm like 99% sure there's a breakdown of him when he visited the MLB studios. You can look that up on YouTube or the MLB network, where he's talking about his top hand. And he's talking about keeping it vertical so that he can get to higher pitches. Like it's all his top hand. Well, what does he do here? His top hand's really underneath to hit this low pitch. Well, that's probably natural for him. So he has to fight that on higher pitches. So know you as a hitter. That's probably the best thing that I can provide for players with experience is, I can tell a player, this is what you're comfortable with, right? Like, where do you like the ball? Like I can look at your swing and be like, you're a low ball hitter or you're a high ball hitter. Okay, so what we have to do is we have to create a plan where we maybe practice 65% the other way. Okay, so if you're a good high ball hitter, let's do 65% of our reps down. Okay, vice versa. If you're a good low ball hitter, let's do 65% of our reps up. You're still mixing and matching. You're still doing both during a session. It's just we're gonna weight one side of that equation a little bit. So anyway, that's a really cool swing of Story. It kind of covers all the aspects of a good stride. One of the things he does that I didn't touch upon, his front shoulder does stay up a little bit more than most. So at heel plant position, notice how his front shoulder isn't really down. It's not down nearly as much as players that we've looked at before. Okay, so that is an area of concern in terms of adjustability. Maybe that's why his strikeout rate is a little bit higher, because once he plants and this front shoulder starts to come up a little bit, he's got to go. It's hard for him to make adjustments to slower pitches from that position. So how do we compensate for that? Maybe we're a little bit smarter, right? We have to anticipate a little bit better and not miss our pitches. But that would be, if there's one thing that I see with his swing that would lead to more strikeouts, it would be that, that vertical bat angle, which honestly, it's a really low pitch, so you have to do it. We could look at a higher pitch and it's much less than that. But it would be that front shoulder not being down as much at that heel plant position right here. So anyway, there's the breakdown for Story. He does some things, you can pick. Like if you're a 16-year-old player watching this, or an 18-year-old player, or a 10-year-old player, or a boy or a girl, what are the great aspects? His rhythm and stride are fantastic. Like that is the thing that I would try to copy. His rhythm and his stride. And then, yeah, you may. So for those of you watching the analysis, Jim asked, was this stride something he's always done, or is it something that evolved over the years? Which is a fantastic question. Let's think about who he was surrounded by when he got to the big leagues. Obviously, Tulo was gone, but Tulo had kind of a similar glide as this. Maybe somebody in the minor league system had mentioned that. But Carlos Gonzalez was probably his main mentor, Charlie Blackmon as well. So this is very, very similar to Carlos Gonzalez. Carlos Gonzalez had more of he would swing the leg. But you can even see Story here. He starts open, and then he brings his foot in, and then he glides, and then he swings it open and lets it rip. So it's a very right-handed Carlos Gonzalez, who was just such a great hitter all around, his entire career. So I'm sure it had something to do with that. I'm sure it had to do with, people that he was around and guys figured out. I remember when Bonds was a superstar, all of a sudden all the Giants guys looked like Barry Bonds. They had the same stance, they had the same arm guard, they had the same hitch. They all tried to do the same thing he did. Didn't mean it worked out for everybody.